5 years ago, my fiancé's first love was diagnosed with a terminal illness. He resolutely gave up our wedding and went to accompany her around the world to fulfill her last wish. Now, Paula has miraculously recovered, and he has returned. He took Paula home and saw that I was still there. Thinking that I had been waiting for him to return, he graciously allowed me to stay. Paula has just overcome her illness and is still very fragile. I will allow you to continue staying here to take care of her. I paused for a moment and replied softly, I'm already married. I don't need your permission to stay here. He looked at me with disdain and said, don't joke around. Everyone knows you're head over heels for me. Later, when he saw my marriage certificate, his face turned pale. You're clearly my wife. The morning sun filled the courtyard. I was watering the roses in the yard. Suddenly, I heard a familiar yet unfamiliar voice behind me. Ria, I didn't expect you to still be at my house. I stopped watering and turned around slowly. Joe held Paula's hand and stood side by side not far away. After 5 years, the look in his eyes was not only surprise, but also a sense of pride that was hard to put into words. It seems like you've been waiting for me to come back for the past 5 years. I put down the kettle and wiped the water droplets from my hands. Joe hugged Paula tightly, his eyes full of pride. Paula's illness is finally cured. We traveled around the world for 5 years and fulfilled all her wishes. He looked at Paula deeply, then turned his gaze to me. She's the only one I've ever loved in my life. I looked up, stared straight at his face, and said calmly, congratulations to you both, but I'm already married. Joe paused for a second upon hearing this, then burst into laughter. Don't pretend, Ria. Everyone knows you're head over heels for me. You've been stuck in this empty house for 5 years, just waiting for me to come back, haven't you? His tone was arrogant, as if he were the master of the house. Paula has just overcome her illness and is still very weak and fragile. I'll let you stay here so you can take care of her. Consider it compensation for staying in my house for 5 years. This is Joe's special favor. I shook my head and calmly met his gaze. I'm staying here, and I don't need your permission. A flash of anger crossed his face, then he put on a smug expression. Don't forget, we never even had a wedding, and we never got a marriage license. You've been living under my roof for 5 years, but to be honest, you're nothing. You're just an outsider. In the sunlight, his features were still handsome, but at that moment, they were unbearably harsh to my eyes. 5 years is enough time for one person to see the true face of another. 5 years ago, I stood in a wedding dress in a luxurious banquet hall, filled with joy as I waited for my groom. However, Joe suddenly strode onto the stage, grabbed the microphone, and said, I'm sorry, everyone. The wedding is cancelled. Paula has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and I must be by her side as she takes her final steps. All eyes were on me. Sympathy, pity, shock, and gawking stares pierced my heart like 1,000 needles. In that moment, my world collapsed. Her memories were interrupted by Paula's soft voice. She lowered her eyelids at the right moment, her shoulders trembling slightly. Her voice was light, but every word pierced Joe's heart. Joe, let's just go. After all, Ria has been living here all these years. It's too much to suddenly come back and disturb her. She swayed slightly and leaned weakly toward Joe. Only I knew the calculation and satisfaction hidden beneath her eyes. Joe immediately wrapped his arms around her waist as if protecting a priceless treasure. His face was filled with tension and concern. Paula, don't say that. Your health is important. This time, I won't let you suffer. Let's go home and you can rest. After comforting Paula, he turned his head, and the warmth on his face instantly disappeared, replaced by anger. You've lived in my house for 5 years. Who paid for your food, clothing, and daily expenses? Paula is suffering outside, fighting against her illness, he asked me harshly. Ria, has your conscience been eaten by dogs? I took a deep breath, suppressed the emotions welling up inside me, and tried to explain. Joe, you need to understand. Enough. He rudely interrupted me, I allowed you to stay so you could take care of Pola and make up for the past 5 years. Since you don't know how good you have it, get out now. Right now. Joe, you have no right to make me leave. I raised my head and spoke firmly. At that moment, the butler Peter heard the sound and came out. Ah, the young master is back. Then Peter turned to me respectfully and said, Madam, the gentleman just called and said he would be back half an hour early and is already on his way. Hearing this, my tense body finally relaxed. Fine, Mike is back, so there's no need to waste our breath on this hypocritical couple. Joe seemed to ignore us and ordered Peter condescendingly, Peter, tidy up the master bedroom on the first floor. Pola is weak and has trouble climbing stairs. Peter looked troubled. Master, that room has been converted into the young master's playroom. It's full of his toys and books. I'm afraid it's not suitable for someone to stay in. Joe furrowed his brows, looking confused. Young master? When did I have a nephew? Peter's eyes were filled with affection. The little master is 3.5 years old, clever and quick-witted. He loves drawing and telling stories. You'll definitely like him when you meet him. Joe listened and looked enlightened. I get it. Mom and Dad must have thought I wasn't home, so they adopted a child to keep them company. I looked at him talking to himself and sighed silently. 5 years had passed, and he still lived in his own world, never caring about other people's feelings or lives. Young master, you misunderstand, Peter hurriedly explained. The young master is the eldest master's biological son. Joe burst out laughing, his eyes filled with disbelief. My brother got married and had a kid? Didn't he say he'd work hard until he was 40 before thinking about settling down? This is like the sun rising in the west. I'll be damned if I don't see which woman could tame my cold-hearted brother. Peter looked at me hesitantly, his eyes full of questions. I nodded slightly, motioning him to speak. Peter took a deep breath. Young master, Ria is your sister-in-law. She and the eldest young master have been married for over 4 years. Joe's smile froze instantly. 5 years ago, on that rainy night, when all the guests had left and I was standing alone in the empty ballroom, it was Mike who handed me a clean handkerchief and said in a low, gentle voice, I'll take you home. Since then, Mike has been a frequent presence in my life. He never mentioned Joe, but just quietly stayed by my side, helping me get through the darkest time of my life. He would bring me a steaming hot midnight snack when I worked late into the night, carefully remember the blooming season of every flower I liked, and on my birthday, give me the design studio of my dreams. Love arrived quietly and unexpectedly. Soon, we held a simple and warm wedding, without any grand pomp and circumstance, attended only by our closest family and friends, who witnessed our happiness. Joe's body stiffened, and his Adam's apple rolled up and down with difficulty. After a long time, he found his voice and burst out in a shrill laugh. Don't be ridiculous. How could my brother marry you? He's always been so picky. How could he possibly like an ordinary woman like you? Peter, has she bribed you? She must have been deliberately getting close to my brother while I was away, trying to use him to get ahead. Peter wiped the sweat from his forehead. Young master, Ria is really your sister-in-law. She and the eldest young master are deeply in love, and the youngest young master is almost ready for kindergarten. Joe laughed derisively as if he had heard a fairy tale, pointing at me with his fingertip. You? My sister-in-law? He turned to Peter, his tone threatening. Peter, have you gone senile or has she put you under a spell? We haven't seen her in 5 years, and she's become quite skilled, even buying you off? I looked at him, so certain that he had been deceived, and found it somewhat amusing. Who is Mike? He is the CEO of LS Group and a recognized business genius in the industry. Before the age of 30, he successfully led the company into the international market, established his own technology brand, and won numerous awards. Everyone in the family, except for my father-in-law, dares not go against his decisions. He has never relied on family connections, but has earned everyone's respect through his own abilities. Would he allow me to take advantage of the situation to climb the ladder? That's simply impossible. In the early days of our marriage, I always thought Mike had married me out of sympathy and a sense of responsibility. I even secretly packed my bags, planning to ask for a divorce once the storm had passed. That day, just as I dragged my suitcase to the door, he stood there holding a large bouquet of sunflowers, his voice tinged with a hint of unmistakable hurt. "Why are you leaving? I didn't marry you out of pity. I married you because I truly love you." At that moment, I saw the sincerity and tenderness in his eyes, like a ray of light illuminating all my anxieties. From that day on, I never doubted our marriage again. Over the past 5 years, I have found true love, met the adorable Sam, and built a career I am passionate about. My life is now 100 times more fulfilling and happier than before. I shook my head, trying to keep my voice calm. "Joe, it's been 5 years. Things have changed. You're overthinking it." Paula crossed her arms across her chest and looked down on me with disdain. "Sister, you're so scheming. You replaced all the other servants and bribed the old butler. You've been plotting this all along, haven't you?" Before she could finish, I poured the water from the cup in my hand onto her face. "Say that again." Joe was instantly furious. "Rhea, I was actually going to give you $2 million as compensation so you'd get the hint and leave. It seems I was too kind. You've already taken advantage of me enough. For the past 5 years, you've occupied this position, enjoying wealth and luxury, while Paula has not only had to endure illness, but also been tormented by you here. Now, I order you to kneel down immediately and apologize to Paula." Peter was so frightened that his face turned pale. He hurried forward to stop her. "You mustn't do that, young master. Rhea is your sister-in-law, she is your senior. How can you let her kneel? If the master finds out." I slowly got up and walked forward, my face expressionless. A hint of triumph flashed across Paula's eyes, and she couldn't help but smile, even taking a step forward and striking a forgiving pose, ready to accept my apology. I walked up to her, and her smile grew even brighter. But I ignored her and crouched down, spreading my arms wide to welcome Sam, who was running toward us at full speed down the garden path. "Mom." Sam was covered in dirt, clutching a fluttering butterfly in his hand, and threw himself into my arms excitedly. "Mom, look. I caught a butterfly." Sam carefully opened his palm, and a beautiful blue butterfly was fluttering its wings in his palm. I gently stroked his little head and said, "That's great, you caught such a beautiful butterfly. But the little butterfly needs to go home to its mother. Let's let it go, shall we?" Sam nodded wisely, watching the butterfly fly away before lifting his little face again. Joe stared at the scene in disbelief, his expression shifting from shock to utter disbelief. He stared at Sam's face, his voice trembling. "Rhea, where did you get this child? You promised me you'd only have children with me for the rest of your life." I bent down and picked up Sam, feeling only a sense of helplessness and ridicule. 5 years had passed, and he still lived in his own fantasy world, believing that the whole world revolved around him. Paula rolled her eyes, her voice weak but clearly sarcastic. "Joe, don't be angry. But look at this child, his eyebrows and eyes really do resemble yours when you were little. Could it be that Miss Sue found someone outside to impersonate you?" Before she could finish, Sam furrowed his little brow and hugged my neck tightly. "Mom, that lady talks so weird. Is she a bad person?" Children speak without reservation, yet their words struck a nerve with certain people. Paula's face turned red in an instant. I held back a smile and patted Sam on the back. "Don't say that, she's a guest." Sam broke free from my embrace and stood stubbornly in front of me, her little hands on her hips. "You can't bully my mom, I'll protect her." Joe's face turned ashen, and he roared, "Shut up, you little bastard. Who gave you permission to speak?" The words "little bastard" felt like poison needles piercing my heart. I clenched my fists tightly, struggling to resist the urge to rush forward and slap him. I crouched down and whispered to Sam, "Sweetheart, would you go wash your hands with Peter? Your dad will be back soon." Peter understood and took Sam's hand, saying, "Little master, let's go wash our hands and give your dad a surprise." Just then, the sound of a car engine came from outside the courtyard. I breathed a sigh of relief. Help had finally arrived. Joe's parents hurried into the courtyard. When they saw Joe, Joe's mother's eyes instantly reddened, and she rushed forward and hugged her son tightly. Joe's father, however, turned grim as soon as he saw Paula. Who allowed you to bring this woman here? Joe's mother quickly grabbed her husband's sleeve and whispered, "Don't say another word. Do you want our son to run away again?" Joe wrapped his arms tightly around Paula's waist and stood tall. "Dad, Mom, I'm going to marry Paula. No one can stop me this time." I didn't bother listening to his bold words. My gaze swept past them and landed on the entrance to the courtyard. The familiar black sedan pulled up smoothly and stopped not far away. The door opened, and a tall, steady figure stepped out. Seeing Mike, she finally felt at ease. Mike walked into the yard with steady steps, his gaze briefly resting on Joe as if he were a stranger. He walked straight up to me, gently took my hand, and asked, "Where's Sam?" Joe finally realized that Mike had ignored him. He straightened his back and spoke in a challenging tone. "Bro, you're just in time. I'm officially telling you that I'm going to marry Paula. As for Rhea," he glanced at me, his tone condescending, "considering she waited 5 years for me, she can stay here as a maid or something. That's the least I can do." He paused, raised his finger toward the direction Sam had just left, and said, "But that child named Sam must be sent away. My child, Joe's child, can only be the child of Paula." Mike finally looked at him directly, his eyes calm and still, yet carrying an invisible pressure. He took a step forward, shielding me slightly behind him. His voice was not loud, but it carried clearly to everyone's ears, "He is my son. Why should he leave?" Hearing this, Joe took a half step back, his eyes filled with disbelief. This child, is your..." "Yes, it's mine and Rhea's." Mike took out our marriage certificate from his pocket. "Look closely." Inside was a clear photo of Mike and me. Joe's face turned pale. "But she's clearly my wife." Joe muttered to himself. "Please show some respect." "She is now my wife, Mike's lawful spouse," Mike said coldly. At that moment, Sam ran over. Mike ignored Joe's reaction, put away the marriage certificate, bent down, picked up Sam, and asked softly, "What did you draw today, little artist?" "I drew the ocean and little fish." Sam excitedly hugged Mike's neck and said in a babyish voice, "Dad, I want to see your new design." This heartwarming father-son interaction made Joe's face turn even paler. "Impossible. This is absolutely impossible." Joe's parents were about to speak. Joe suddenly stepped forward. "Rhea, how could you forget our feelings so quickly? Can the love between us be forgotten just like that?" His voice trembled with a hint of choking and pleading. "5 years ago, you swore you would love only me." Mike sneered coldly. "Really? Just like you swore on your wedding day that you would take care of her for the rest of your life, and then turned around and left her for another woman? What right do you have to talk about love? You don't even know what love is." Joe's face turned pale, and he was about to argue, but Joe's father's voice rang out from beside him. "Enough, Joe." Joe's father glared sternly at his younger son. "Did you think about how Rhea felt when you abandoned her? It was Mike who was by her side during the most difficult times over the past 5 years. What right do you have to come back now and blame others?" "But Dad, no buts." Joe's father raised his voice. "Mike and Rhea's marriage has my blessing and your mother's. You must respect that." Joe's mother walked up and gently patted Joe on the shoulder. "Son, some things are lost forever. You should move on." Joe stared blankly at Sam in Mike's arms, and the clear sound of Dad still echoed in his ears. He couldn't accept this reality. How could Rhea, who had once belonged only to him, become his brother's wife and have such a big child? Paula, standing nearby, quickly sensed the sudden change in atmosphere. She suddenly clutched her chest and turned pale. "Joe. I feel a little unwell." Joe was immediately distracted and hurriedly rushed forward to support her. "Paula, what's wrong? Let's go to the hospital." He picked up Paula and hurried out. As he passed by me, He paused for a moment, his gaze lingering on my face with a look of reluctance. Ria, this isn't over. He lowered his voice, left those words behind, and walked away quickly with Pola in his arms, without looking back. 3 days later, in the afternoon, I was in my study organizing design drafts when the doorbell suddenly rang. I opened the door and saw Joe. He hadn't seen me for a few days and looked like he had lost weight, with bloodshot eyes. Ria, can we talk? I hesitated for a moment, but finally let him in and led him to the living room. His gaze swept across the living room and finally settled on the family photo on the wall, his Adam's apple moving slightly. In the photo, Sam is being held by Mike, and I am snuggled up beside them, smiling happily. These past 5 years. He begins, his voice dry, I haven't gone a single day without thinking about you. I picked up the warm water beside me, didn't respond, and just watched him perform. When I left you back then, I had no choice. Pola threatened to kill herself if I didn't go with her. I sneered, so you abandoned me on our wedding day, in front of all the guests? Joe lowered his head, his voice pleading, but my feelings for you are real. Ria, give me one more chance, just one. I can give you and the children the best life, better than what my brother can give you. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the green plants in the courtyard bathed in the afternoon sun. Joe, my life right now is good. I turned around and calmly met his gaze. You can't give me what I want. You couldn't give it to me 5 years ago, and you certainly can't give it to me now. As I watched his shoulders slump, I continued, I love Mike. He gave me respect, stability, and a real home. You'll never understand that. Joe's face turned pale, and he was about to speak when the doorbell suddenly rang. I opened the door, and Pola was standing there. She didn't wait for me to respond, but pushed her way in. When she saw Joe, her expression immediately turned gloomy. Well, Joe. I've been looking for you all day, and you're hiding here after all. Pola turned to me, her eyes full of hostility. Ria, you really are relentless. You're already married to Mike, and now you're trying to seduce my Joe? I looked at her calmly. Pola, watch your language. This is my home, and I have the right to ask you to leave. Leave? She laughed sharply. Who do you think you are? Mike married you out of pity. He probably despises you. Is that so? A cold voice came from the doorway. Mike had appeared there at some point, his face dark. He strode in, walked past me, and before Pola could react, he slapped her hard across the face with a loud smack. Pola stumbled, covered her face, and looked at him in disbelief, her eyes filled with fear. Get out. Mike's voice was as cold as ice. Pola, this is your last warning. If I hear you slander Ria again, you'll pay the price. Pola was furious and dragged Joe out the door, glaring at me viciously as she left. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. You think you won? Just wait and see. I'll make sure everyone knows about your sordid past. The next morning, my phone kept buzzing. When I checked it, social media was ablaze. A post titled, The True Face of a Rich Family's Wife, From Mistress to Wife, was being shared like crazy, filled with all sorts of slander against me. The post claimed that I had been having an affair with Mike for a long time, that I had deliberately approached Joe just to marry into a wealthy family, and even implied that Sam was not Mike's child. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. These malicious rumors had already begun to affect my work, and several important clients called to say they wanted to suspend our cooperation. Years of hard work seemed to be ruined in an instant. After seeing this, Mike immediately contacted the public relations team and lawyers to start gathering evidence in preparation for a lawsuit. Don't worry, I've already had someone track down the source of this post. 3 days later, the technical team confirmed that the IP address of the post came from the hotel where Pola was staying, and the evidence was conclusive. At the same time, the person Mike sent to verify Pola's medical records also made a shocking discovery. The attending physician responsible for Pola, after repeatedly checking the records and the latest test reports, was shocked to say that her physical examination report was normal and she had never suffered from any illness. Her so-called terminal illness was completely fabricated. A 5-year scam. Mike laid the evidence in front of Joe. He almost immediately drove to the hotel where Paula was staying. "You've been lying to me for 5 years?" Joe rushed into the room, his face pale, and grabbed Paula by the neck. "You're not sick, are you? Answer me." Paula initially tried to argue, but faced with the irrefutable medical report, she finally revealed her true colors. "So what?" she sneered. "I'm not faking it. Will you give up that woman Rhea and marry me at the wedding?" Joe shook his head in pain. "I gave up everything for you, abandoned the person who truly loved me, and it was all a carefully orchestrated scam?" Paula sneered. "Don't pretend, Joe. Do you know why I came back? Because I'm almost out of money and I need you to keep supplying me." Joe staggered a few steps, the last trace of warmth in his eyes vanishing completely. He roared, "Get out! Get out! All of you, get out!" That night, Joe sat alone in the corner of the bar, downing one shot after another. In the early hours of the morning, Joe posted a drunken message. "Rhea, I was wrong, completely wrong. I shouldn't have let you go. Give me another chance to come back to you." The photo accompanying the message was a picture of us from our university days, when we were still young and innocent, full of dreams for the future. This WeChat post quickly caused a stir, with many media outlets screenshotting and reporting on it. In no time, the topic "LS second young master publicly confesses his feelings to his older sister-in-law" trended on social media. When I saw the news, I felt extremely embarrassed and immediately contacted Joe to ask him to delete it, but the phone remained unanswered. When Mike saw the news, his face was expressionless, but the atmosphere around him was so tense it was frightening. Those days, he seemed like a different person. He spoke very little and spent less time at home. Often, I would go to sleep before he came home, and when I woke up, he was already gone. At the dinner table, it was just Sam and me, and the atmosphere was quiet and somewhat oppressive. A week later, Joe's newly opened company suddenly received notice that it was being shut down and ordered to undergo restructuring due to alleged commercial infringement. Even Joe, who was usually slow on the uptake, immediately realized who was behind this. He charged into the LS Group headquarters building like an angry lion, rushing straight to the top floor to the president's office. "Mike, you've gone too far. How dare you shut down my company?" Mike calmly put down the documents in his hand. "It's just business competition. Your company infringed on our patent rights, so we're just following the rules." "Bullshit." Joe slammed his hand on the table and stood up. "You're just retaliating against me because of that post." The argument between the two brothers became increasingly heated, and they were about to come to blows when Joe's father arrived just in time to stop the fight. "Enough!" Joe's father shouted angrily, "Are you brothers or not?" He turned to Joe, "You're 30 years old, not 3. Can you use your brain when you do things? Do you have any idea how much trouble your post cost Rhea and Mike? Do you think we've embarrassed the family enough?" Joe lowered his head and said nothing. That evening, Mike came home and, unusually, had a drink. His eyes were filled with a vulnerability and anxiety I had never seen before. "Rhea," he said suddenly, his voice low and hoarse, "I'm afraid of losing you." I froze, not knowing what to say. He continued, seeing Joe's post, "I couldn't help but think about our past. I'm afraid that you'll regret choosing me." I hugged him tightly. "You fool, what are you talking about? The person I've always loved is you, and you will always be the only one for me. The past is in the past." The next day, Joe's father urgently convened a family meeting and finally decided to transfer Joe to the U.S. branch. The official announcement was that it was to expand overseas markets and entrust him with important responsibilities, but in reality, it was to get him away from this place of trouble and avoid further complications. Joe unexpectedly didn't object this time. Perhaps he also realized that staying here would only cause everyone pain. I thought life would calm down. On an early autumn morning, the sun was shining brightly. I was taking Sam to kindergarten when I spotted a familiar figure lurking suspiciously at the school gate from a distance. The person was wearing large sunglasses and a hat, seemingly trying to conceal their identity, but their deliberate posture only drew more attention. It was Pola. I immediately became alert, gripped Sam's hand tightly, and quickly dialed the number of the bodyguard Mike had arranged. Pola seemed to sense my alertness, gave a sinister smile, and slowly walked toward us. "Long time no see, Rhea." She took off her sunglasses, her eyes bloodshot and her face sallow, looking extremely unwell. I shielded Sam behind me. "Pola, please stay away from us, or I'll call the police." "Call the police?" She smiled crookedly. "You took everything that belonged to me, and now you want to call the police to arrest me?" She suddenly reached out to grab Sam. "Come on, kid, come with Auntie. Auntie will take you to a nice place." Sam was so frightened by her ferocious expression that he started crying loudly, clinging tightly to my legs and hiding behind me. I stood in front of the child and shouted sternly, "Are you crazy? Don't touch my child." A flash of madness crossed Pola's eyes. "Joe abandoned me, Mike hit me, and it's all because of you, Rhea. I want you to taste the pain of losing someone you love." She suddenly lunged toward us, trying to forcefully grab Sam. At the last possible moment, a figure rushed forward with lightning speed, kicking Pola in the leg and knocking her to the ground. It was Mike who arranged for the bodyguard to secretly protect Sam. Seeing the dangerous situation, he immediately stepped in to stop Pola's crazy behavior. Sam was so scared that he started crying. I held him tightly and kept reassuring him, "It's okay, sweetie. Mom is here. No one can hurt you." The security guards quickly restrained Pola, and the police arrived shortly after to take her away for questioning. Mike heard the news and rushed over, his face pale. He hugged Sam and me tightly and said, "I'm sorry, it was my fault." The subsequent police investigation was even more chilling. Not only did Pola plan the kidnapping, but she also prepared a series of even more vicious acts of revenge and spread more rumors about me. In her phone, the police found detailed plans and reconnaissance photos, providing conclusive evidence. Ultimately, Pola was sentenced to prison for attempted kidnapping and defamation. After the case was closed, Joe came to our home on the eve of his departure abroad. He stood at the door, not coming in, looking at me with a complicated expression. Gone were the previous stubbornness and resentment, replaced by deep apology and relief. "I'm sorry, Rhea." His voice was low but firm. "I apologize for all my selfishness and recklessness in the past. I was a jerk, and I hurt you and myself." He turned to Mike, his tone sincere, "Brother, thank you for always taking care of Rhea, and thank you for forgiving me. I wish you both eternal happiness." Before leaving, Joe knelt down, touched Sam's head, and showed a rare look of tenderness on his face. "Little guy, take good care of your mom and dad, and grow up healthy and happy." Watching his figure gradually fade into the distance, I felt a sense of relief unlike any I had ever experienced before. The shadows of the past had finally dissipated completely, and life had finally returned to its peaceful and tranquil state. Time flies, and another year has passed in the blink of an eye. Over the past year, the turmoil has gradually subsided, and life has returned to normal. Joe went to the United States, and Pola received her just punishment. The dark clouds that once hung over us seem to have been completely swept away. Sam is in kindergarten, and every day he brings home all kinds of cute, childish drawings. Today is a special day. It's Mike and my 5th wedding anniversary. 5 years already. I sighed as I looked at the calendar in the morning. Mike hugged me from behind, resting his chin on top of my head. "Yeah, 5 years, Rhea." To celebrate, we decided to revisit the seaside town where we had our first date, this time bringing along Sam, our little tag-along. 3 hours later, we stood on that familiar beach, the sea breeze gently caressing us, and the sun shining warmly on our family of 3. Sam ran excitedly along the sand, picking up seashells and chasing seagulls, his face radiating with a pure, innocent smile. At dinner, I was at the seaside restaurant I had booked, and I ordered the exact same menu as 5 years ago. Do you remember? This is where we had our first date 5 years ago. I swirled the red wine glass in my hand and gently clinked it against his. Mike's eyes sparkled with tenderness. Of course I remember. You were wearing a blue dress, and your hair was tousled by the sea breeze. I was amazed by the details of his memory. I didn't expect you to remember so clearly. I remember everything about you. He held my hand, his eyes filled with deep affection. Under the moonlight, we were walking along the beach. Sam was already playing in the hotel's children's playground, leaving just the two of us. Mike, thank you for your love and companionship over the years. I stopped in my tracks and looked into his eyes earnestly. You have given me a complete and happy home. He gently pulled me into his arms. Actually, I never told you, but I've liked you since college. Hearing this shocking confession, I stood there stunned. What? We didn't even know each other back then. Do you remember the campus singing competition in our sophomore year? On the night of the finals, you wore a white dress and quietly sang Once Upon a Time. There were so many people in the audience, and it was so noisy, but your voice suddenly touched my heart. But you were already with Joe at that time, and I didn't want to ruin your relationship, so I never confessed my feelings. I looked at him in disbelief. So on the day of the wedding, you showed up at the banquet hall. Well, I just wanted to quietly wish you well, but I didn't expect that to happen. He paused. But I have to admit, when I saw you so sad, part of me was relieved because it gave me a chance to get closer to you. The sea breeze blew, bringing a slight chill. But I felt a burning sensation in my chest. All the hurt and pain of the past seemed to be gently soothed away in that moment. After returning to the hotel, we took Sam back to his room and watched him sleep peacefully. Mike and I smiled at each other. This was our greatest happiness. The next morning at breakfast, Mike received a message from Sam's teacher saying that Sam's artwork had won first prize in the city competition. Looks like our little artist is going to be famous, Mike said proudly, patting his son on the head. Sam looked down shyly, but his eyes sparkled with confidence. I'm going to open the biggest art gallery in the world. In the sunshine, Mike led Sam toward me, one big and one small, their shadows stretched out long behind them. Their smiles were pure and bright, even brighter than the sunshine outside the window. I know this is my happiness, the most genuine and secure happiness that I hold tightly in my hands after weathering storms and hardships.